Welcome to the Mindful Moments podcast, a space where we explore self-awareness, compassion, and resilience through real stories and honest conversation. In each episode, we talk with incredible individuals about their experiences, insights, and strategies for navigating life's challenges and staying grounded in a complex world. My name is Lily, a teacher and the founder of Mindful Sparks, and today I'm joined by Mark Rennie, principal at DGS Hanoi. Mark, a Trinidadian Canadian, has been living overseas for 21 years and feels that he is a cliched global citizen. He's really grateful he's had the opportunity to live in 7 countries and 9 cities in his life. It was a dream he had as a little boy born on a small island many years ago. He is a husband to an incredible partner who shared this journey with him, and an educator who understands that teaching is one of the few professions that can reach through time. He became an educator because of the horrible experiences he had as a small hyperactive child stuck in a country with no understanding that every child develops at a different pace and learns through different approaches. Mark is also on the advisory board of Mindful Sparks and has been a great support and fountain of advice when Mindful Sparks was but a thought in my head. So let's begin and see how this conversation unfolds. Hi Mark, it's so great to catch up with you today. I'm really excited to be able to explore a little bit more about your experience. I mean, it's been so varied and, so diverse. So I think it'd be really awesome to hear about all the different ways you've experienced education and how it's been changing and how that impacts your personal practice as well. So from us, I mean, about Mindful Sparks, you've been amazing with me since the beginning when it was just an idea in my head during COVID. We're really focusing now, we've been giving it a lot of thought. I've been thinking a lot about the direction we're heading in, and our focus is to really redefine what teacher support looks like and looking at that longer term investment of giving teachers strategies for themselves that they can use, and then they can begin to implement into the classroom as they see fit, and then begin to teach them to their students and kind of grow off of there. And the 3 kind of areas that we really focus in on is strengthening our self-awareness, really understanding ourselves, what makes ourselves tick, and where, maybe our triggers or our challenges lie. Compassion, how we can be kinder to ourselves and others, and also building resilience. So how can we use the knowledge that we've learned about ourselves and the practices that we've been doing to help us set a plan into action or put some strategies in place, that can benefit us in the long run, looking after our mental, emotional, and physical health. So let's just start with the big question. In your from your point of view, what does self-awareness, compassion, and resilience mean to you?
I think compassion, first and foremost, is something I've always felt. Being an empathetic person, compassion forms a big part of who I am. Compassion is the ability, in my mind, to recognize that not everyone sees things the way I do, not everyone experiences things the way that I do, and to be able to support them at that place, to be able to empathize, be able to understand where they're coming from. Um, Self-awareness is that inner dialogue that I have with myself, just to be, a constant check-in throughout the day, throughout my life, whether it be professional, whether it be personal, to be having that conversation all the time. How is this going? How am I doing? Can I do this better? How am I feeling? I think that's something that I think really defines who I am, and that's yeah, to me that is what self-awareness is. And when we're talking about resilience, I think resilience is the ability to get up after you fall down. And I know it's not as simple as that, but for me, in my life, that's been my experience, that every time I get knocked down, getting that energy, finding that inner strength to get back up again, but with a plan, to make sure I'm not doing the same thing over and over again the same way. If I fall down, okay, let's get back up. But what am I going to change this time? How am I going to do it differently this time? So I think that's kind of how I feel about those three words: self-awareness, compassion, and resilience.
Which one would you say is kind of the most relevant in your life right now? Which one are you connecting with the most at the moment?
I think self-awareness right now. And that's not just professional. I think that's personal as well. I think, we've seen the recent changes globally in politics. I think from there's a vast majority of the population that had a bit of a blow dealt to them a few weeks ago with the election, and I think I watched how the election impacted me and impacted my well-being so profoundly that it took me, I had to step back from it. I have stepped back from social media, from politics, from everything to do to those things that are impacting my well-being. Doesn't mean that I don't care for them or believe in them, but I can no longer engage at that level as I used to. And then my self-awareness said, well, how am I going to do this? How am I going to move forward? How am I going to balance the reality that how the world is not going the way I want it to go, but also my engagement with it is having starting to impact my well-being. So I think self-awareness very recently has been played a very big role in what I've been doing.
I think so many people can resonate with that. I mean, even, obviously the political landscape wherever you are right now, it can be very, very challenging for very, very many people. But even if you begin to kind of take that lens a bit closer, there are going to be things in people's lives that, you might just have that moment and go, why am I buying into this? Or why am I giving this energy and time? Because every time I do, I leave depleted or angry or
Yeah,
frustrated or confused. And this isn't bringing me joy. This is actually taking so much from my day, or, it's impacting my relationship with my friends or my partner or my family, because I can't differentiate at the moment. Like, I'm so involved in
yeah,
something that the even though I'm not physically there, or it's not a tangible thing, but it is having tangible impacts on my life.
absolutely. Something that I've actually recently, right after the election, I think I got a call from my older brother, and he was devastated. And I mean, the difference for me is that how, and I think for us as well, is that we're in Asia, so we do get to kind of take a step back and ignore. We have the capacity to be able to ignore because it's not in our face day to day the implications of those results. But he called me and he was devastated because he lives in Canada and he has to deal with the reality of what it's like to be in North America right now. Um, and what we've done as a family, we have our little WhatsApp chat, and we no longer discuss politics in that family chat. We do a happy share where we every day we try and share something happy that's happened either to us or that we've seen to make us realize that how those simple positive actions that happen every day will have a more profound impact on our day to day than being fully engaged with global politics. I think that's really helped us a lot. Recognizing how authentic uh, positive personal change is so much more important than these big geopolitical uh, ideas that we're trying to push and promote. I'm not saying they aren't important, they're absolutely important, but I think for our well-being, trying to make a change in our own personal lives, trying to make a change in our own local communities, uh, will impact us better than engaging at times with these geopolitical challenges that are going on.
100%, 100% agree. And just curious as well, I mean, you've had a very interesting life. You've lived in, was it 7 countries and 9 cities? Do you think having that, experience of moving quite a bit, being like you're talking about in communities, like being in very different communities, now you're in Asia, do you think that that has maybe implicitly, explicitly influenced how you kind of, what self-awareness, what compassion, what resilience mean to you?
Absolutely. I think the experience of being an immigrant is where that need for resilience pops up. Knowing that how you are different, that you do stand. So moving to Canada at a young age and having to recognize that I do stand out. And maybe not everyone's going to see me the way that they should or treat me the way that I should be treated in a fair and equitable way has required me to be resilient. And I think that's why resilience has always been there. There's always been a need for me to be resilient. But then being able to go global and going to Asia and recognizing how my view of the world. I remember the first time I read that how there were pop stars other than the ones I knew. There's whole cultures that I'm fully unaware of because you grow up in this very provincial world where you assume that the culture and the famous people are the only people that are famous. And then having that awakening, as silly as it sounds, that there are other countries with their own culture and their own pop icons and their own, heroes really made me realize that there's a lot I don't know, and then made me more self-aware of myself, and the fact that I'm quite ignorant about the world around me. Um, and I think that that's framed a lot of what I do. I'm a bit more patient now. I recognize that I don't know. I know so little with each country I move to, and there's so much I need to learn. So yes, I think being able to have lived in so many different cities and countries has forced me in many ways to be more self-aware of my shortcomings and of my ignorance and to be more compassionate because the reality is that how I don't know where someone else is coming from. I don't know the baggage they're bringing to the table with me to the conversation. I don't know, and it extends also to work as well. I don't know what happened at home to a staff member, to a teacher before they came into work. So then I have to fully be aware of that. So yeah, it's really impacted me a lot.
I love that you made that comment about like, they have their own pop stars and their own celebrities. When I first moved to China, I was like, how do you know like pretty much everything I know and like, and I know nothing
Yeah.
about what you know and like? Like, how can this be? Like, who are these people that you're obsessed with? And why do you know all the characters of Friends? Like, this is such a
So
weird.
true.
Why is my life or my culture just dominating yours, but there's nothing coming back the other
Nothing
way?
coming back.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. But it's not even Asia too. Even the difference between, Great Britain and Canada. There's so many elements of culture that happens in the UK that we know nothing about in Canada. Shows, music stars, so many elements of it. And we're culturally similar.
Yeah.
And there's still that wall that blocks us from knowing about the UK. I mean, the North American culture, specifically American culture, is so dominant.
Mm.
It is quite eye-opening. It really is. Really is.
It's very true. That's also, I mean, off on a small tangent here, but when I first moved to China, so this was 2007, I didn't speak like this. I spoke very much like where I came from in the southeast of England. I had no D's, no T's, no H's. I spoke quicker. My words were a lot more like blended together. And I taught adults at the time, nobody could understand me because they are so used to American pop
The
culture
accents.
that
Yeah.
they only really knew that accent. So, like, there was me and another British guy who's from Sheffield. So he had a very different accent to me. And we just spent our days just like constantly repeating ourselves. And I think over time, the way I speak, my accent, the way I structure sentences has changed so much to try
Yeah.
and fit in a little bit more, and to not just spend my time going, oh, how many more times do you want me to say this?
Mhm.
So I'm curious about something you said earlier when you were talking about self-awareness. You were saying it's how I can really understand myself and you said about how I can reflect and think, how could I have done that better? Or how could I approach a situation better? What does better mean in that context? Because that's quite a big word.
It is.
People might have different associations of what better means. So for you, what does that mean?
I want to share a story about actually when I really realized self-awareness in my workplace. And I think maybe then I can explain it.
Mm.
Explain it. During teacher training, I remember walking into a class, and it was one of my observation classes, and we all know how intensely stressful that is, to be observed. My mentor was a very strict, very traditional, but an incredible older teacher, and I had had a bad day, a really bad day, and I went to the class, and unfortunately, the kids got a taste of my bad day. They did, and it wasn't my intent. And then I walked out, after she knew the lesson. I knew I'd done a horrible job. And she walked in, my teacher, my mentor, and for that very difficult conversation you have after your observed lesson. And she said, "You're not doing well today, are you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not." And she's like, "Well, I guess the kids know that now." And that stuck with me. It stuck with me because it made me realize, and she wasn't trying to be mean, but she definitely taught me a lesson in that moment that uh what I bring to the table, I affect, and I forget who says it, but it's a saying that goes, I affect the weather of my classroom. I affect the climate of my classroom. If I am having a stormy day, my kids are going to probably have a stormy day unless I am cognizant of the fact that I'm bringing that to the classroom. And that's where that self-awareness comes into it, right? Being aware that yes, I'm not saying you shouldn't have a stormy day. We're human. We're going to have those days where we are super happy or we're super down or we're super upset about something, but being aware that you are feeling that way and there's a trickle-on effect to that. And I think so when I talk about be better, it's not to be better, it's just to be aware that how I need to mitigate my feelings that I'm having on those around me, mitigate the impact of my feelings I'm having right now on those around me. So that's, I guess that's what I mean when I say better
Mm.
in that context.
That was such a great example. I had such a physical response to that of when your mentor said, "Well, I guess your kids know that now." I went, "Ooh," because it's true.
Yeah,
It's so true. Like we've all been there. I mean, gosh, yeah, I can think of a million lessons where I've just, the kids have left or I've left and gone, well, I didn't quite go as I planned
yeah,
because I wasn't able to create that space between what was happening internally and
absolutely.
what I was doing as, and what I was projecting out because I
Yeah,
just didn't have those strategies at the time to say, do you know what? It's okay to have a shitty day and it's okay to be in a bad mood, but it's what I choose to do in that that matters, you know? And I've definitely learned it's taken a lot of practice. So I'm very honest with my kids now. I will say, do you know what? I didn't sleep well last night. I got stuck in a traffic jam. I'm in a little bit of a bad mood. So, how about and okay, I teach younger children, so I have this at my disposal. How about we just take 10, 15 minutes of free play, go read a
yeah,
book, do some coloring, because I know that I need to regulate myself before we jump into
absolutely.
phonics or maths. And that's where, yeah, I mean, that's self-awareness, isn't it? Instead of just being like, ding, the bell's gone, get your books out, sit down, be quiet, you know, tap, tap, tap.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just being able to take that moment and recognize the impact and recognize and you know what and what you're saying there as well too about telling the children, they appreciate that. They get
Mm,
that. Because I think I always believe this about young kids, because most of my career has been with primary students. They feel emotions greater than anybody else, dude. They do, and they don't. And we talk about strategies. They're just developing their strategies on how to deal with those emotions. So if a teacher tells them, "Hey, you know what? I'm having a pretty crappy day," they're going to get that because they can relate and they know, yeah, she's having a bad day. I've been there. I know what that's like. And they're probably the most sympathetic that you're going to get. I think adults will probably be more like, well, you know what? Everyone has a bad day. Just get on with it. But I think kids will get it, and they do get it. So I think that approach works really well. Just to
and
be honest with them and tell
yeah.
them.
I do. And the cute little cards you get from them.
Yes.
I like you, smile. And you're like, oh,
Yes,
okay.
absolutely.
You don't get that. So I've taught teenagers as well. You don't get that. They don't care. They're like,
No.
okay, well, great. Well, my life's terrible. So I don't know why you're complaining. My bad.
Absolutely.
My bad. Cool. And so this kind of links quite nicely to compassion. So, like, say for going back to that example you gave, right, where you had a bit of a tough day and it showed in the observation after that comment from your mentor, how did you, I mean, maybe did you show yourself self-compassion in that moment? Was that a skill that you had at that time?
Not at all.
It wasn't. So then
Not at all.
looking back at it now, having that awareness, what would you say to Mark, back then to bring that compassion in, to make this, and oh, it's okay that this happened. What could we do differently next time so it doesn't?
There's something that you taught me many years ago, a line that you've used with me a few times, and it's you need to be kind to yourself. And it's
Mm,
something that if I could have gone back, that Mark was from 15 years ago and said to him, yeah, you screwed up. The kids saw you, you made a mistake, your mentor saw you, you made a huge mistake there. You got to be kind to yourself.
mm,
Because at the end of the day, now going and beating yourself up over it is only digging that hole deeper for you. And what does kindness look like? Kindness looks like acknowledging that you've made a mistake and maybe taking a step back and trying to figure out why that mistake happened. What was the trigger? What was the emotion? How could you have dealt with it differently? What strategies could you have used? Because I guarantee you, going from being upset, then being called out on it, to then going and wallowing in it some more and getting deeper into that hole, it's not helping you at all. And it's not making you a better teacher either. It's simply not. Definitely, and being kind to yourself also means, to take maybe you need to take a moment and say, you know what? Yeah, today was a really hard day, right? But also planning for how you're going to do this differently the next time. And then we go towards resilience at that point, right? Because now you've been knocked down
mm,
and you need to plan for how you're going to get back up again. So yeah, I think Me 15 years ago, no, I was definitely not able to deal with that. But now, I've been very lucky to work with great people, to learn from great people, to go through the experience over and over again and
Mm.
fall down and get back up with a plan. So yeah, that's the way I would take it with
Yeah.
myself.
And for me, out of these three things, for me personally, I find compassion the hardest because compassion really encourages and really brings from you objectivity, right? Instead of like, because you referred to that today was hard, not today was awful. And that's two very different narratives that we can tell
Mhm.
ourselves that will then what's the word I'm looking for? Like,
Affects our perception of it, doesn't it? It
words have
frames it for us.
disappeared today. Like I've been struggling with my vocabulary. But yeah, I mean, it's going to influence how we've seen that. Today was hard. Today was awful. What emotions are immediately associated with something hard or something awful? Where do your thoughts immediately go? And yeah, depending which spiral, I mean, both spirals potentially are going to have a little bit of a downward trend to it because maybe there is disappointment. Like, oh, I had such a good, idea planned or a task planned, and it just, I didn't show myself in my best light. And you want to because
Yeah,
nobody gets into teaching because it's like, oh, it's an easy job to do. Like, you get into teaching because you love it and you want to make
absolutely.
a difference. This is a job of very dedicated and passionate people. So it can be really hard. I mean, for those who don't know, Mark was actually my mentor for my PGCE. And I think every time you came to observe my lesson, I probably cried on you afterwards because I was like, it wasn't how I imagined it in my mind. But that's
It
why
never is.
I didn't have compassion for myself at that
Oh,
time. I had to really learn that. And I can't remember if you remember him, there was a guy called Sean who worked in international stream. He was the one that was really helpful for me during that time. He
good.
used to come and give me little pep talks, really about building that self-kindness, the way I'm talking to myself. And he was the
No,
one that he was the one actually that put me on this kind of trajectory, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah,
oh, great.
takes time. And you do, been teaching for since 2006. I can't tell you the amount of times I've walked out of a class and gone, oh.
Yeah.
But I've also walked out of a class many times and gone, that was amazing. Like it's all
And
been
I hope that's what you remember. And I think sometimes
right.
teachers don't remember that.
Yes.
You focus on those times when you've walked out and been like, wow, I could have done better. But I guarantee you there's more times where you walk out and you're like, what a moment, what a lesson. I did great. I'm so proud of myself. I think we need to start spending more time focusing on those things. I want to go back to what you talked about with awful versus hard. For
Mm,
me, awful sounds something that is that you have no control over. That word. It's awful. I have no control over it being awful. It's something that was done to me and that's it.
mm,
Hard means I'm being challenged. I have control over it. And I can rise to that challenge and I can, there's things I can do to it's not so defeatist, I find, as the word awful. Awful just sounds like it's the end of the world. There's nothing gonna. And you're right. The words we use frame our approach to it. I tried very hard to use the word challenge. Challenge is a really important word to me. I've had a challenging day. It's been a challenging situation, and that's very intentional. I try not to use words like awful or bad or because then I feel like I don't have ownership over making a change with that. Whereas a challenge, yeah, I'm being challenged. I'm going to rise to that challenge and I can overcome it. So I think it's really important what you said about that. The difference in those words is so
mm.
critical.
And that's definitely where a lot of self-awareness comes in. What words, like especially with our children, we're saying to them, be careful of your words and be mindful of your words, and words hurt other people. But there's very little conversation about, but how are you talking to yourself? What
Yeah.
words are you saying to yourself? Like how often are you putting the word but in? Oh, this was really good, but I could have done better. Or, oh, they did that really well, but so and so, did it quicker than me. Like that comparison. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think language is super, super important when it comes to this.
absolutely.
And I'm curious, like we've been talking quite a lot about from like a teaching perspective. Obviously, you're in leadership. You've been in leadership now for
11 years now. Yeah, 11,
11
12 years
years,
now.
right? Um, how does this, we're talking about self-awareness, compassion, resilience. How does this kind of translate when you're in a leadership role? Obviously, you can still have it how am I fitting in? What does my role have? What are the impacts? I can see all that. But obviously you are having people come to you and you're going to people as well. You're overseeing staff. How important is like self-awareness, compassion in a leadership role?
It's critical. It's absolutely critical. I think the ability to remember what it's like to be a teacher and remember
Mm,
that how everyday teachers are walking into their classes and they're on stage. And that's something that I think sometimes leaders forget, that leaders are in offices. Good leaders are out amongst their staff working with them. But by and large, we're not on stage. Um, Teachers are on stage every single day and they give a piece of themselves every single day to be on stage. Being aware of that and reminding yourself that that's really important. Trying to be authentic as a leader as well. Being able to show that you're not perfect.
mm,
Something that happened to me, I think, very recently. You work your whole career and you build up, and you are always looking at the next stage of your career. Okay, I've got this job. What's the next job up from that? And for me, that's been the kind of the trajectory of my career. And finally, I got to the role that I thought was the pinnacle of my career, my role before this one, in Singapore. And I remember coming to the realization that how I didn't like the role. I don't like the role. I'm not happy in this role. And I went through a very difficult time. And I was speaking to a staff of 220 teachers, and I'd had a very difficult 2 weeks. And I don't know what came over me, but I told them I've had a very difficult 2.5 weeks and I've been struggling. And, the days are hard, very, very difficult. I was very authentic in that moment and I strive to be authentic, but sometimes as a leader, you have to balance being authentic with also not being seen to be weak, unfortunately. Um, but I left that stage and it wasn't the intent for me to talk about that, but it just kind of came out, and maybe because the emotions were so bubbling to the top. And afterwards, I had so many staff members, so many colleagues come to me going, "Thank you for that. Thank you for that." It's so nice to hear that a leader is saying that because that's how I feel every single day. And it's incredible. In that moment, I thought I'd failed as a leader, but actually, no. Maybe from a corporate standpoint, I did. I don't know. I don't work there anymore, so it doesn't matter. But I know that for me, from a personal standpoint, and actually from a professional standpoint, I didn't fail. I bridged the gap. I allowed them to see that how what they're going through. Well, I go through the same thing on a daily basis, and I'm going through it a lot right now, and I'm struggling. So being able, I think that's compassion on their part towards me, and it allowed me to have compassion towards them because it made me realize that we're not, yes, leaders have a very different role, but we're not that far apart
mm,
in regards to what we face every day.
100%. And I would imagine as well to see, a male in a leadership role being that open and authentic must have landed quite differently for a lot of people. There are, I mean, if you're looking at international schools, I don't know every international school, so, I'm not putting them all in under one umbrella, but generally, leadership is made up of a high proportion of men.
Yep,
And,
absolutely.
it can be very male dominated space. And with that doesn't always come that vulnerability or that openness. Like you were saying, maybe on one level, a corporate level, I might have, you know, quote unquote failed that day. But on a humanistic level, what I've actually done is strengthen our community so much more because people, I'm 3D all of a sudden, right? I'm not this 2D leader walking around going, yeah,
Very
great
true.
job,
Yeah.
high five. I'm a whole person, as I'm complicated like you, and I can have messy days like you, and but we can still connect on that. And that's something I think people forget about compassion is that common humanity part of it as well, is understanding. Maybe I haven't had your experience, but I've had something similar, or I know someone who's been through that. And this isn't oh, poor you, I'm sorry you've been through that. Like, this is something that people go through. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
I think far too often leadership is expected to be this two-dimensional
Mhm.
individual. I think that's what we're taught as leaders. Be strong, be inspiring. All the different things, the kind of the discourse around leadership, very much macho, very much just masculine, stand up, be strong, be the inspiring leader. The truth is, it's the loneliest job in the world, and being a principal or being a head of school, and it's there are limitations to how much you can do that. And I'll be honest, I'd much rather have a leader who can come to me and say, yeah, I am struggling. And I'm having a hard time. So I know that how they're human. And also it makes that bridge that I know that how if I wanted to go to them when
Mm,
I'm struggling, they're going to be open to that. And that needs to change in international schools. I mean, you talk about the dominance of men. I mean, we also know the dominance of one particular, Western males of a certain age, of a certain color. I'm happy that there's a time 5, 6 years ago where we couldn't talk about that, right?
mm,
But now with the likes of ALOC out there and CIS being very progressive in how they're doing their accreditations, we can now speak to these things.
mm.
And maybe that diversity, as we see more and more leaders coming who don't fit a certain template, we're going to see a diversity of approaches as well, I hope, um, which will have an impact on teachers. So no longer teachers expected to be these rigid, constantly strong, just deal with whatever has been thrown at you individuals. That's my hope that with diversity of leadership, we're going to see diversity in approaches.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And, what's happening, like there has to be change at the leadership level. And even within, I'm just thinking of schools I've worked in or schools I know about. I have yet to work in or see a school where I can say that the adult population of the school, in whatever capacity, if you're looking at it as a whole, cleaners, security, teachers, everybody, genuinely reflects the student population that's going to that school.
Very true. Yes,
Like
absolutely.
they don't match, and
Yeah.
it's a very weird,
Yeah.
like here's two worlds and we're making them kind of meet but not kind of meet. And yeah, when you have that more diversity, exactly like you're saying, just how people deal with challenges, how people pick themselves back up is going to be so different. And there are going to be kids that are like, what this teacher's been saying to me doesn't resonate with me, but oh well, I have a different teacher, and their cultures are maybe a little bit more aligned with mine, or there's similar aspects of our culture, and the way that they deal with it in their culture makes more sense to me. And
Yeah.
I can integrate, like I'm interested now. I want to learn about understanding myself better. I want to learn how to navigate challenges with more kindness, and with, and not be so stressed out. Like it's planting those seeds, isn't it? And not, I know I'm not going to resonate with every child. No teacher is going to resonate with every child, but we need to give them an opportunity to be around teachers that they might find that connection with.
Absolutely. I mean, representation is everything. We know that. And data has shown us that in America, that when you have teachers of color in classes with students of color, they perform better
Mm,
because they're role models. Because how can you imagine yourself to be successful if the person teaching you looks nothing like you? Who do you look to for as a role model? I'm not saying that how it's always the case. No, I grew up with, majority, white teachers, and I think I've done all right for myself. But I know that if I had exposure to teachers who maybe were from my culture, or not even just my cultural background, my socioeconomic background as well, I think I would have been able to connect stronger with them. So representation matters.
mm,
And the landscape is changing. Not quick enough, I think, but it is changing.
mm.
5, 10 years ago, we would not be having this conversation. Now we are, and I know that there are organizations out there now that are doing amazing things for ensuring that change is happening.
Mm. Very true. So I'd love to, it's a massive topic and I'd love to properly dive into it, but maybe that's another conversation.
Yeah.
Um, we've talked quite a lot about self-awareness, compassion, resilience in very different capacities and different situations. Do you think there are any common misconceptions surrounding what self-awareness, compassion, or resilience kind of are, or the benefits of them?
Absolutely. I think resilience is an interesting one. I think we judge resilience many ways from a personal standpoint. Well, if I can do it, why can't they do it? I've been able to overcome this. Why can't they overcome this? I've gotten up from this fall. Why can't they? And I think sometimes, and that's where compassion comes into it, right? Recognizing that how not everyone has the same strategies, skills, strengths that you do, and maybe they need a different approach. I think that's really important as well. Being able to recognize that how what worked for you may not work for somebody else. It's interesting. Being a leader of a school, I'm exposed to a variety of different teachers, and they all have their strengths and they all have their areas for development, and they all have their struggles, and they're all different. And having a one size fits all approach to all of them is an absolute failure. It is. The teachers who I have who will thrive, by being left alone, well, that approach is not going to work for teachers who need me to go into their class and hear about what they're doing, the awesome stuff they're doing in their classroom. They thrive in that environment. I've had one teacher of mine who I just, really had an impact on me, taught me, because I always walk around to my classrooms and meet with my teachers. And it's more just to make sure I'm connected. But then I started to realize with this one particular teacher, they just love sharing what they were doing in their classroom with their students. It wasn't me. It wasn't me being the principal that had a school that they wanted to meet with. They wanted to talk to someone, anyone about the awesome things they were doing with their students. And that was it. That was all. And that teacher was one of the best teachers I've ever worked with. And all they needed from me to support them was to give them 5 minutes of my time to listen. And that same thing goes with resilience as well, too, when we talk about resilience. That same teacher, when they fall, what they need to be helped to be picked up is going to be very different. Maybe they need me to sit and listen to them or give them ideas when they've had a bad lesson, or be the person they can spitball ideas off of, versus a teacher who, and there are teachers like that, who don't want me in their classroom, who don't want me anywhere near it because it brings anxiety into them. It makes them feel that they're constantly, no matter how much I try, it makes them feel that they're being observed or inspected, they're being judged. So that teacher is not going to thrive in an environment with like the other teacher. And that anxiety will be too overwhelming for them to function. And that will eat away at their ability to have uh, an environment that's good for their well-being. So just recognizing how everyone's approach, everyone's ability is different.
Mm,
And that ties to that resilience. When they fall down, they're going to need a different approach to get back up again.
mm, mm, mm. I think what you touch on there is so important, like that one size fits all. And that's something that, we're really trying to address with Mindful Sparks is being said it because a lot of and my experience too, when I first got into this kind of area of education, well, here's a curriculum, go teach it. And you're like,
Yes.
okay, cool. But like, I mean, this doesn't resonate with any of my kids, or like these kids like it and they don't. And culturally, it's so far removed from these Chinese kids that there's no common ground for them to connect. Like, and it was very much, I found lots of like stumbling blocks. And that's why I really, when I was in the classroom trying so many things, a bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of that, just to see what was working and also what worked for me. Because some of the lessons I was like, I am stuttering and stumbling and falling over this because I don't understand why this is important. And if I don't understand why it's important, I can't really get behind it. So that's really what we're trying to do when we're supporting teachers as well, to be like, here is a toolbox. Here's how you use every tool, and you
Absolutely.
use them in a way that works for you. And maybe the beginning of the week and the end of the week, you're using different tools. Maybe throughout the day, you might use all seven. You might just use one. You might just have one continuous strategy that you use as your go-to. And occasionally you switch it up. That's great because that works for you. It has to be unique and responsive to your needs and your classroom's needs, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So to wrap this up, one question. If somebody came to you, say one of your teachers came to you on Monday and was like, I've been thinking a bit this weekend and I'm realizing that I would like to get to know myself better. To be a better teacher, I need to really understand what makes me tick, where maybe my areas of growth could be. I want to understand myself better, but I don't know where to start. Like, how do I begin to build my self-awareness? How do I begin to practice compassion? And eventually, how can I begin to look at what resilience looks like for me? What would you tell them?
I think I'd go back to that one thing we just talked about. One size does not fit all, right? Everyone's going to find their own approach, but I would share with them my own approach, my own daily approach. So I don't journal, but I think journaling is an exceptionally good idea. I think that's a great starting point for any teacher to sit and to journal. But what I do is I review my day. So every morning I wake up with my cup of coffee and I'll review the day I had before and I will write notes about the day. I'm a big reader of the Daily Stoic. I don't know if you know, it's a little book about Stoics. It's great. It's good for me. It's 2 or 3 pages. I'll read through it every day. I'll highlight the things I think will help me for the day ahead. Just that routine of spending time to review the day I had before and look to the day I have ahead uh, with clear eyes. Because when you're in the moment, it's impossible. I cannot do that when I'm in the middle of the day. I can't do that at the end of the day either because I'm still maybe sore from something that happened, or maybe, I'm not seeing it clearly. But for me, first thing in the morning is the best because I'm most clear-headed then. Might be different for somebody else. And that's what I would say to them. I'd say find a routine that works for you where you can actually look at the day and look at the day, through a clear set of eyes. What are things you're proud of? What did you do yesterday that you're so proud of that made you happy? What's an area where you thought, you know what, this could have been done differently? A lot for me, a lot of my day is spent in conversation, and I'm learning the impact and the power of conversation. I know it's important, but I'm really learning that how it isn't just simply talking to someone. There's so much more going on there. So I spend a lot of time going over the conversations I've had in a day. What could I have done differently to be more sympathetic, compassionate, or in sometimes be more clear and transparent and firm? Because my biggest area is that I struggle with being firm sometimes. And I think, that's not healthy for the colleague either, because uh, I think being truthful to your colleagues is very important as well. It'll help them be better. So yeah, so that's the approach I would recommend for them. That's what works for me. Um, and once again, not everything's going to work. Not my way is not going to work for everyone. So also talk to them about them exploring different opportunities as well, and talking to colleagues as well, to other colleagues.
I think that's great. Great advice. I think it's so important that when people ask me, I'm like, try everything within reason. There's only so many hours in the day, but try meditation. If you don't like it,
Yep.
don't sit there making this, forcing this to happen. Try journaling. If journaling doesn't work, go for a walk and review your day, review your successes. Um, I think it's so important to have an open mind to just be like, okay, what at this moment in time, what works for me now? I'm
Yep.
understanding that that routine might change, and that's okay. Because again, there isn't a one size fits all of understanding myself, like or connecting with myself or reflection. There's so many ways that we can do it.
And you're absolutely right. You raise a really important point. It's where you are as well, too. What might work today may not
Mm,
work 3 weeks from now. And you'll find that, what I'm doing right now was not what I was doing 6 months ago,
mm.
and will not be what I'm doing 6 months from now, because I'm at a different stage. I'm facing different challenges that require me to take a different approach. So you're absolutely right. Try everything. I think that's a great approach. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Try it all at once and see what happens
Yeah.
within reason.
Yeah.
Don't stress yourself out because you've tried too many things and now you can't work out that out. Awesome. It's always such a pleasure talking to you, and there's so many things that I think we could have spoken about for hours, but obviously we're limited by our time. Thank you so much again, Mark,
Oh,
for
thanks,
being
Lily. Thanks for
part.
having me.
And
And thank you so much for the past 15 years of knowing you and supporting me as well, because you've supported me so much, and so much of my practice and what I've learned is influenced by what you've shown me, what you've taught me. So thank you so much for that.
thank
Thank you.
you. Thank you.